This time, let's look at some of the flood events that our ancients recorded to have happened through history. In North America, the Hopi legend has two versions of the Hopi's emergence into the present Fourth World. The prevalent one is that the spider grandmother caused a hollow reed to grow into the sky, and it emerged into the Fourth World at Sipapu. The people then climbed up the reed into this world, emerging from the Sipapu. The location of the Sipapu is given as the Grand Canyon. The other version has it that Tawa destroyed the Third World in a great flood. Before the destruction, Spider Grandmother sealed the righteous in two hollow reeds, which were used as boats. On arrival to a small piece of dry land, the people saw nothing but water even after planting a large bamboo shoot, climbing to the top and looking about. Spider Grandmother then told the people to make boats out of more reeds and use the islands as stepping stones along the way. The people then sailed east until they arrived on the mountainous coasts of the Fourth World. In either story, it finishes with the Hopi traveling to the extremities of the land in all directions, building cities, and abandoning them as they went, leaving markings on the rocks to show they had been there. Far in the north was land of snow and ice, which was called the back door of the Fourth World. This was closed to the Hopi. However, they did record that others came through the back door into the land. Eventually, the Hopi finished their migration and ended up at their current location in northeastern Arizona. We also have flood tales of the Saanich. These are nations from the north coast of the Gulf and the San Juan Islands, southern Vancouver Island, and the southern edge of the lower mainland in British Columbia. They called themselves the saltwater people because they lived from the bounty of the ocean and the land. Their summer homes were among protected bays and inlets of the Gulf Islands. Their winter homes were in Sonic, meaning emerging land, or emerging people since the time of the Great Flood. The Eskimos say a great inundation, together with an earthquake, swept the land so rapidly that only a few people escaped in their canoes to the tops of the highest mountains. Other tales for North America include the Comics people with the legend of Quinish, Anishinaabe with the creation story, Turtle Island, the Inuit flood legend, and the Nisqually with the beginning of the Nisqually world legend. In Mesoamerica, one myth documented among the Teapanic and Huaxtecs has a man and his dog as the sole survivors of the deluge. But the man finds out that the dog takes the shape of a woman during the day when he is away. The man and dog woman are then left to repopulate the earth. Another myth, found among the Aztecs and the Teutonic people, relates how a human couple survive by hiding in a hollow vessel and start to cook a fish when the water subsides. When the smoke reaches the heavens, the gods become angry and punish them by turning them into dogs or monkeys, depending on the version. In Mayan mythology, as expressed in the Popol Vuh, the creator gods attempted to create creatures who would worship them 3 times before finally succeeding in creating a race of humans that would pay proper homage to their creators. The 3 previous creations were destroyed. The 3rd race of humans, carved from wood, were destroyed by a flood, mauled by wild animals, and smashed by their own tools and utensils. Mayan flood myths, recorded by Diego de Landa, and in the Shilam Balam of Chumael, holds that the only survivors of the flood were the 4 Bacabs, who took their place as upholders of the 4 corners of the sky. In Mesoamerica, a variety of reasons are given for the occurrence of the flood. Either the world was simply very old and needed to be renewed. The humans had neglected their duty to adore their gods, or they were punished for a transgression. Many of the modern myths include, obviously, Christian references, such as the murder of Abel by Cain as the reasons. In Mesoamerican myth, the flood was but one of several destructions of the creation, usually the first of 3 or 4 cataclysmic events, although there is some evidence that the Aztecs considered the flood to be the 4th. Also, in Mesoamerica, among the Nahue, which is the Aztec people, tell that there were no survivors of the flood and creation had to start from scratch, while other accounts relate that current humans are a descendant from a small number of survivors. In South America, we have the legend of Tren Vilu and Keke Vilu. It is a Mapuche flood tale that tells the story of a fierce battle between 2 mythical snakes. Tren Vilu. Tren means related to the earth, and Vilu means snake. And the Keke Vilu. Keke means related to water, and Vilu, of course, snake. It gives an explanation of how the south of Chile came to have its geography. According to the Mapuche, these 2 snakes were originally the children of the most powerful Pillans, who were converted into their animal forms as punishment. Peripillion's son was turned into a huge snake, that would be Keke, and Antu's son turned into a huge snake, and that would be Tenten. They were to be enemies, just as Antu and Peripillion were. Keke was sent to live into the sea to help care for it with the water spirits, and Tenten was sent to live on earth and help care for the earth and to help humanity. Thus, these 2 snakes were used as an instrument through which the will of the ancient Mapuche spirit was fulfilled. It is said that after Keke awoke from his years-long slumber, he became enraged because of the ungratefulness that men showed for every gift given to them by the sea, and thus used his fish-shaped tail to hit the water. With it began a great flood. Since he had the desire to punish humanity and to incorporate all terrestrial life to its dominions, KK ordered the waters to flood the valleys and hills, and to bring all of its inhabitants to the bottom of the sea. Seeing Tenten that both humans and animals were desperate, and that of men invoked her. And as by orders of her father, she was the one who had to provide them with the wisdom and protection, she decided to help humanity. Thus, she helped the inhabitants and the animals to escape by raising them on her back and taking them to the hills. And she transformed into birds those who were trapped by the waters, so they could escape by flying. Those who were drowning into fish and marine mammals, one of them being the origin of the talking dolphin. And those who had already drowned in Sampal, which is mermen and mermaids. Those who were immobilized by the terror they felt were transformed into Mankiel, which means petrified. But as the sea continued to rise, Tenten had to order the hills to increase height to counteract the power of KK. Angry, KK began to fight against Tenten in a titanic battle that lasted a long time until both snakes were tired. KK was partially defeated as he wasn't able to flood all of the land. However, the waters did not return completely to their old level, giving Chile its current topography. According to Chiloe tradition, KK was satisfied with the portion of land that he had managed to flood, and delegated his functions pertaining to the sea to the great Milalobo. According to Mapuche tradition, after the cataclysm, everyone continued their quiet life until one day it was Tenten who was angered by the attitude that men had, and made all the volcanoes erupt, and their population had to move to safer places. From that moment on, Tenten continues to manifest itself through earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, while KK continues to cause tidal waves and floods when he rolls over during his sleep. Other South American tales also include from Canary, the Inca, Muisca, and the Tupi. In Asia, in the ancient Near East, in Mesopotamia, there is the Gilgamesh flood myth, which says the great gods Anu, Enlil, Ninurta, Inuji, and Ah were sworn to secrecy about their plan to cause a flood. But Ah told the plan to Etnapishtim. He was ordered to build a boat which was to have equal dimensions with the corresponding width and length, which was 120 cubits, with 6 decks divided into 7 and 9 compartments, and be covered over like the Apsu boats. He was told to tell the elders they can no longer inhabit Enlil territory, and they should go down to Apsu to live in the Ah territory, which is freshwater marshland near the temple of Ah, or known as Aninki, at the city of Eridu. When the storm came in the early morning, a black cloud arose from the horizon. The thunder god, Adad, rumbled the cloud, and the storm gods, Shular and Hanish, went over the mountains and land. The Anunnaki gods lit up the land with their lightning. There was a stunned shock at Adad's deeds, which turned everything to blackness, and the land was shattered like a pot. All day the south wind blew, and the water overwhelmed the people like an attack. No one could see another. The mistress of the gods wailed that the old days had turned to clay because she had said evil things in the assembly of the gods, ordering a catastrophe to destroy her people and fill the sea like fish. The other gods wept with her. Their lips were burning. The flood lasted 6 days and 6 nights, flattening the land. On the 7th day, the storm was pounding like a woman in labor. Then the sea calmed, and the whirlwind and flood stopped. All day there was quiet. All humans had turned to clay. The terrain was flat. The boat then lodged on Mount Nemush. Other stories from the ancient Near East are the Sumerian creation legend, and in Abrahamic religions we have Noah's Ark, which we already covered previously, as well as the Islamic view of Noah. In China, there's a great flood of China story, which was a major flood event in ancient China that continued for 2 generations, which resulted in great population displacement, among other disasters such as storms and famine. People left their homes to live on high hills and mountains. Dating has taken this event back to around 1900 BC, which is about 400 years after the Exodus event we discussed prior. The legend says it was during the reign of Emperor Yao that the Great Flood began. The flood was so vast that no part of Yao's territory was spared, and both the Yellow River and the Yangtze valleys were flooded. The nature of the flood is shown in the following quote. Like endless boiling water, the flood is pouring forth destruction, boundless and overwhelming. It overtops the hills and mountains, rising and ever rising. It threatens the very heavens. How the people must be groaning and suffering. In India, we have an incarnation of Lord Vishnu as a fish. He forewarns Manu, a human, about an impending catastrophic flood and orders him to collect all the grains of the world in a boat. In some forms of the story, all living creatures are also to be preserved in the boat. When the flood destroys the world, Manu, in some versions, are accompanied by the 7 great sages. They survive by boarding the ark, which Lord Vishnu then pulls to safety. In Paluga, the creator god of the inhabitants of Andaman Islands sends a devastating flood to punish people who have forgotten its commands. Only 4 people survive, 2 men and 2 women. From the Philippines, we have Igorot. It says, when the world was flat and there were no mountains, there lived 2 brothers, sons of Lumawig, the Great Spirit. The brothers were fond of hunting. Since there were no mountains, there was no place to catch pig and deer, so the older brother said, "Let us cause the water to flow over all the world and cover it, then the mountains will have to rise up." The others from Asia include Korea, Malaysia, and the Takati people. Now, over in Europe, the ancient Greek flood myths describe 3 floods. The flood of Oges says 9,000 years ago, a never seen again accumulation of soil came down from the mountains, and earth fell away all around and sunk out of sight. Only small islands and the mere skeleton of the land was left behind. The flood of Deucalion says the Titan Prometheus advised his son to build a chest. All men perished except those that escaped to high mountains. The mountains in Thessaly were parted, and all the world beyond Isthmus and Peloponnese was overwhelmed. Deucalion and his wife floated in a chest for 9 days and 9 nights. Afterwards, at the bidding of Zeus, they threw stones which became men and women. The Bibliotheca gives this as an etymology of the Greek Laos people as derived from the lost stone. And the flood of Dardanus says, Dardanus left Phineus in Arcadia to colonize a land in the northeast Aegean Sea. When the deluge occurred, the land was flooded, and the mountain where he and his family survived formed the island of Samothrace. He left Samothrace on an inflated skin to the opposite shores of Asia Minor and settled on Mount Ida. They lived in the open for 50 years. His grandson, Tros, moved from the highlands down to a large plain on the hill that had many rivers flowing down from Ida above. There he built a city which was named Troy. Today we call the area Dardanelles. The Augean deluge ended the Silver Age, and the flood of Deucalion ended the First Bronze Age. In addition to these floods, the Greeks tell how the world was also periodically destroyed by fire. Others from Europe include the Welsh, the Norse, and the Finnish flood legends. The Irish has Labor Gabala Erin, which says the first people to arrive in Ireland are led by Cessair, daughter of Bith, son of Noah. They are told to go to the western edge of the world to escape the oncoming flood. When the flood comes, Fintan is the only one to survive. He becomes a salmon and later an eagle and a hawk, living for 5,500 years after the flood, whence he becomes a man again and recounts the Ireland's history. Now we can move to the Oceania region. This would include Polynesia and Hawaii. In Hawaiian mythology, Nu'u was a man who built an ark with which he escaped a great flood. He landed his vessel on top of Mauna Kea on the Big Island. Nu'u mistakenly attributed his safety to the moon and made sacrifices to it. Cain, the creator god, descended to earth on a rainbow and explained Nu'u's mistake. In the Maori tradition, Ruadapu became angry when his father elevated his younger half-brother ahead of him. Ruadapu lured his half-brother and a large number of young men of high birth into his canoe and took them out to sea, where he drowned them. He called on the gods to destroy his enemies and threatened to return as the great wave of early summer. As he struggled for his life, the half-brother recited an incantation invoking the southern humpback whales to carry him ashore. The last place that we'll talk about is Africa. I found no tales of any floods for Africa. However, our own research shows us that in northwestern Africa, near the Eye of the Sahara, there's clear runoff of where there used to be waters that ran back off into the ocean. Most of Africa I would consider safe zones for the most part due to the high elevation. Now, let's turn our attention for a moment towards Japan. There are dots along the coastal hills of Japan, and these things are called the tsunami stones. These stones are placed around 300 feet higher than the highest recorded wave. That wave was 127 feet high. These stones are centuries old and give warning to descendants to avoid the same suffering as the ancestors. The warnings from the past read, "Do not build any homes below this point. High dwellings are the peace and harmony of our descendants. Remember the calmity of the great tsunami." Other warnings say, if an earthquake occurs, go to highland in case they foreshadow destructive waves. So, as we can see, this recorded history of catastrophes and floods are not just secluded to the Noah story. Organized religion wants us to believe there was one flood that destroyed the world. However, these different events are recorded through different eras in history in all cultures of the world. We now call this the Noah cycle. Even today, there's an application mainstream is using called the NOAA Weather Radar, which provides us with weather, hydrologic, and climate forecasting for the United States and its territories, as well as adjacent waters and ocean areas. This cycle has occurred over and over in history, right around the 365 to 394 year mark. These events are the cause of mudfloods, the disappearance of cultures through time, as well as changes to our DNA. As I have said before, this is not meant to cause fear, but to educate us on the cycles of Earth to enable survival, which our ancestors have told us repeatedly through the ages. High land is the way to survival. Let's talk a little bit about this map. This map was put out there by Ed Dames. He's an ex-CIA agent, and this is the map of what's going to occur with our world after a pole shift. So the first area we're going to look at is the red zones. These are our safe zones, which, as we can see, we have some in the United States, South America, Greenland, and part of Europe, and a little bit in Australia and New Zealand. Next, we'll look at the dark blue. This is where the coastal subsidence will occur. This will be in northeast Russia and the southern tip of South America. Next, let's look at the green. This is where landmass is submerged. This appears to be part of Ireland, Western Australia, southern part of America, along with the eastern side of Mexico, and the eastern coast of America and Canada. Next, let's look at where our hot and cold areas will mix. This will run through the United States, southern South America, and we'll have an area that runs up from Africa up through the middle of Europe, and we'll also have a little bit over in Australia. Next, we'll look at our flood-prone areas. That looks to be a lot of northeastern Europe, most of the UK, northeastern Africa, and northwestern Canada, as well as the broken up islands above Canada. Next, we have our loss of agriculture, which includes wheat, barley, rye, corn, sago, millet, rice, potatoes, apples, citrus, and grapes. These areas are going to include part of Europe, East and West, India, part of Australia, Canada, and a great deal of the United States, as well as South America. Next, we have more loss. This will consist of our livestock, horticulture, and agriculture. These items will include beef, dairy, pigs, sheep, coconut, cotton, hemp oils, peanuts, and sugars. Next, we will have new faults developing. What I noticed about these is they're running more of a north to south than an east to west. Next, let's look at the epicenters of new major volcanic and seismic activity. So we have up in northern North America, we also have Southern America, Mexico, Eastern South America, Southeastern South America. We're also going to have new activity in Iceland. We have activity in Europe and Asia, all across. We also have a major new epicenter for great activity, which sits right about where the area that I think there's one very large volcano that runs about 1,600 miles across and 1,600 miles north and south. So, an effect of all of this is going to be that new land is going to rise. We're going to have land that rises just west of America, quite a bit west of South America, somewhere near Easter Island or Polynesia. We're also going to have land that emerges southeast of Greenland, as well as the northwest of Europe. So, I hope that this information gives us somewhat of an idea of where is safe and where is not, and what we need to do to survive.